Mekhi Hagens left the HBCU ranks earlier this year, but he decided to change his mind, reverse course, and he's landed at Alabama A&M. Oh yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code Locked On College for 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at God's gifts benefiting one of North Carolina Central's athletes as he makes his move to University of California at Los Angeles. Why'd I say it like that? UCLA. UCLA is where Anthony Peoples-Jones Jr. is headed. In segment 2, we'll take a look at Howard softball, who capped off a dominant season by avenging their only loss in the softball championship game. But let's kick this whole thing off with a little bit of football as we talk about the transfer portal. I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like the portal has been more active lately than I remember it being at this time frame in previous seasons. It feels like we're having more activity in the transfer portal right now than I would say we did last year, and at least more activity that we care about. There's always been transfers going from here to there, but these are transfers we really care about. We care about RJ Johnson III going to FAMU, CJ Montes going and then leaving FAMU. We care about Kendrick Grimes. We'll talk about him tomorrow. Like, we care about these players. And today we're talking about Mekhi Hagens at the biggest position on the field, quarterback, coming to Alabama A&M. This is another high-profile transfer. These aren't Rudy Poo transfer. This isn't, and let me not say Rudy Poo. These aren't transfers that'll fly under the radar. This isn't your offensive guard coming into the team. Like, that's a very valuable position, but nobody's going to talk about the offensive guard or the defensive tackle who is joining the team, because that's just not a sexy position to talk about, especially when you're talking about offensive line. It's very difficult, if you haven't seen that player, to give a true breakdown. You can just say, hey, this was an all-conference player, but if he hasn't done that, then it's not a lot of talking points to go based off of unless we're doing a film study, and that is a little bit more micro than we typically do here on Locked On HBCU. Mekhi Hagens is an interesting prospect. You may remember him from University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. He was just there last year. The connection between Hagens and Giovanni Gibson was one that was high profile, with Gibson being one of the most explosive wide receivers in the country. Being a first-team All-SWAC player, he ended up transferring to the P4 level of no surprise to anybody. He had that written on him all season long. And then Hagens ended up following him into the portal. He went to a different destination, though. Hagens went to Lamar, and Lamar is still an FCS school. I will admit that it surprised me a little bit that he hopped in the portal and went to Lamar, but this is still an FCS school. For whatever reason, something, I guess maybe the spring just didn't work out for him. Maybe he thought that it was a better chance elsewhere. But Mekhi Hagens is now back in the portal, and he's coming to Alabama A&M to join Sam Shade. I really do like this pick. I ain't gonna lie. I like this pickup by Alabama A&M. I think it does a lot of work. I think it does a lot of good work for you. And the one thing I'll say, I hope that it brings, I'm going to give my opinion on Mekhi Hagens in a second, but of everything, whether you want to talk about his dual threat ability, his throwing ability, his running ability by itself, if you want to isolate or combine them, it doesn't matter. Mekhi Hagens is a big-time pickup for Alabama A&M, and if he does nothing else, he needs to bring consistency and stability to that quarterback room because it's been too much hot potato over the last couple of years. You've heard how I've spoken about this show or how I've spoken about that trade on this show. If there's a hot potato quarterback, I believe that you have a bad quarterback room. I don't believe that going between QBs is a route to success. I can't think of a team that I thought highly of that had a lot of success that did this whole, oh, this quarterback, now this quarterback, now this quarterback. You could point to Southern, but I would say I didn't really think highly of Southern last year. They did have some level of success, but I don't think that that works in the SWAC East. I really don't. So if it's anything that Mekhi Hagens brings to Alabama A&M, it needs to be consistency and stability to where they can have a starting quarterback for a whole year. Not quarterback A starts 3 games, quarterback B starts a game and a half, then quarterback A. It's no. We've seen that over the last couple of years with Connell Maynard in the Sam Shade era. That needs to stop. I don't think that that's successful football. I think that is a recipe for failure. That is a sign of inconsistency. It's a sign of poor quarterback play. So if they're doing that in 2025, that means that Hagens is failing. But how do I feel about Hagens? Or actually, let me get the stats first. We saw a big jump from Hagens from 24 or from 23 to 24. And I thought that this was solid because he got more work. I'm not going to give his rushing yards because those are impacted by sacks. And all in all, I don't really like that. So I'm not going to involve that in my numbers. I will give you the touchdowns, though. Because if I run for 1,000 yards, would I get sacked for 500? Now I'm a 500-yard runner, and I'm actually not. So anyway, you saw a decent jump from Hagens from 24 to 23. Oh, I keep saying it back from 23 to 24. He had 117 attempts through the air, 580 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, a 45% completion percentage, and he had 4 rushing touchdowns to add on to that. In 24, you see he has 328 attempts, 2,541 yards, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, a 53% completion percentage, and his yards per attempt jumped up 4 yards. So as you look at Mekhi Hagens' jump from his freshman year to his sophomore year, from 2023 to 2024, you see a player who improved yards per attempt. I know a lot of that had to do with having a great wide receiver in Javonte Gibson, but you got to be able to get it to him. You saw his completion percentage improve. You saw his yards per attempt improve. Or excuse me, I just said that. You saw his yards per attempt improve. Oh, you saw his touchdowns rise. You saw his interceptions rise. You saw everything rise. Here's the thing. You saw everything rise, but comparatively, on the amount of attempts he has, from 117 passing attempts to 328 passing attempts, that's a little less than 3 times his previous amount. His interceptions only rose from 4 to 6. His touchdowns rose from 3 to 16. That's way more than 3 times the amount. That's 5 times the amount of touchdowns he had in his freshman year. You're looking at his yardage. That goes up nearly 5 times. So you're looking at really good production and a great increase in efficiency from from Mekhi Hagens. Now, here's the thing. And I want to acknowledge all of that. Oh, sorry. And he had 3 rushing touchdowns. So he had 1 less rushing touchdown on the year. But in general, you're looking at 19 touchdowns to 16 interceptions versus 7 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. That's probably the most impressive thing. Is we can talk about a rise in touchdowns and a rise in interceptions. His rise in touchdowns was way more than the increase in picks. And in his freshman year, he actually had more interceptions than touchdowns. I know they were both low numbers, but he had more interceptions than touchdowns. For him to flip the script in such a dramatic way, that touchdown interception ratio improving is a great sign. Now, here's my thing about Javonte. I want to call him Javonte Gibson so bad because that's the high-profile player. But my opinion on Hagens is sometimes I feel like I'm missing something because I hear how others will talk about him. I hear the excitement about his game, and I think he's a solid player, but I think people speak about him in a light that I don't necessarily see him in. I call him solid. I think that people think he has the chance to be great, and I haven't necessarily seen that. I know he has some traits that are attractive, his ability to move, his strong arm. I like things about Mekhi Hagens, but I'm not as sold as other people are. I feel like I'm still You ever have something in your cart and it sits there, it's about 4 or 5 days, and you're like, I think I want to buy this. I think I want to buy, I'm not sure. Like, that's where I'm at. He's still in the cart. I'm still impressed with some of the things that he's done, but I can't necessarily say that I'm sold on him becoming an all-conference quarterback. If it happens, I wouldn't be stunned. I'll say that. And I think that the quarterback landscape is very open in 2025. So I wouldn't be surprised, but at the same time, I wouldn't predict it. I wouldn't predict it. His completion percentage is still low to me, even though it improved from freshman to sophomore year. It's still not good enough for me. I felt like I seen too many inconsistencies as a passer when it came to Mekhi Hagens, and that's where I get concerned. I know he has great dual threat ability. I know he can throw the ball, but I want you to throw it more consistently. And in the games I saw, there were times when I was excited, but there was times when I fell flat too. See, if you get to him in the backfield, he's going to get away from you. He has good speed. He has good elusiveness. He's a really good mover within the pocket. And I don't just mean a take off and run mover. He's a pretty good mover in the pocket. The problem is when it's time to throw the ball, he's still 53%. I would like to see that number closer, if not surpassing 60%. I would. So maybe that's just my personal preference, but that's the way that I look at it. Hagens is still young, so I don't want to act like I'm judging him too harshly. I think that he has time to develop. I think he has the ability to develop. I think he has a good ceiling. I just see other people talk about where he's at. And sometimes I feel like we're not on the same, we don't agree on where Hagens is at right now. Maybe we agree on where he can be, but we don't agree on where he's at. And I think that he's a little bit lower than others. I think he's a solid quarterback. I wouldn't necessarily call him all conference at this point, and not just because he hasn't achieved it, because I don't think he is that at the moment, right? So when you're looking at Mekhi Hagens, this is a big deal for both men. I thought that he would transfer within the SWAC, maybe to the MEAC. I thought he would stay with an HBCU. But when he entered the portal from UAPB, I expected him to go somewhere that had a little bit of a higher ceiling, a little bit greater expectations. And he went to Lamar. So that did surprise me. But as he doubled back, he does find somewhere that fits the bill. I know that Alabama A&M specifically is in the East. So they still have to run into Jackson State. I know that they're having a first-year head coach who comes from the D2 rankings, but I like Sam Shade a lot. And I think that Sam Shade is a talented coach, and I believe that the addition of Shade has an Alabama A&M, I want to call them A&M so bad, but Alabama A&M on the rise. I believe the addition of Sam Shade has Alabama A&M on the rise. So when I looked at Mekhi Hagens entering the portal, thinking that he would go to an HBCU with a slightly taller roof than UAPB had, he didn't technically do it the first time, but he did do it this time. And I hope, for Alabama A&M's sake, that he brings stability and continuity to the room, because the Bulldogs need a quarterback who is going to lead you from week 1 until the end of the season, whenever that may be. Not a guy who's going to be interrupted and having 2-3 guys who are trying to lead you. That is a sign of poor quarterback play. Avoiding that will be a sign of quality quarterback play. As we move forward, I want to take a look at Howard softball, because they went 20-1 in the regular season, but they were able to avenge that one loss in the MEAC championship game, and it was a long time coming, but I think it was well worth it. We'll break down that and why Coach Tyson was snubbed for MEAC Coach of the Year as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Now, you ever looked in your bank account and wonder where all the money go? You just spending, you swiping, you spending, you swiping, you spending, you swiping, and you just look at the account one day and say, I just want to see where I'm at. And it's not where you thought you would be. I think we've all been there. Some are more dire than others. Hopefully you weren't on the bad end of that spectrum or the horrible end of that spectrum, but you're looking at a very realistic situation that you could avoid with Monarch Money. No more wondering where my money went. See, I was wondering, how did I drop X amount of dollars? I ain't gonna give y'all all the info now, but I was wondering how I dropped X amount of dollars. And then I got Monarch Money, and I realized I had been dining out more than I realized. I was spending more money out to eat than I thought that I was. Monarch Money allows me to consolidate all the apps that I would use to check my different accounts into one account or one app. And all I have to do is go look at my financial command center, which is on my phone, and it's Monarch Money. So take control of your finances today with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code locked on for half off your first year. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked on NBA, breaking down all of the biggest games. I was just looking at the Pacers game. They went up 3-1. You're looking at the Knicks should be playing tonight against the Celtics. I think that the Warriors and Timberwolves will play today as well. So as you're listening to this, get ready for some of the big games. Anyway, as we push forward, I want to talk about Howard softball because they were dominant and they finished off a dominant season with the way that dominant teams should, with a championship. I actually despise it when you see a team that dominates the entire year and then they get to the biggest game and they fall short. It grinds my gears. It's great story sometimes because it can be positioned as a David and Goliath type of situation, but at the same time, it's not a David and Goliath situation. It's really not. And it kind of grinds my gears when that happens because you were the best team. And I remember this happened to Jackson State women's basketball a couple of years ago. And I think they lost to Southern. And I thought that JSU was clearly the best team in SWAC women's basketball that year. They were dominant. I think they had one loss, maybe two, but I think it was just one loss that year. You knew who the best was. So I remember saying that, and I think I got a little bit of pushback, and I get it, but the best team does not always win, especially in a single elimination scenario. But I'm glad that Howard, the 20-1 Howard Bison, were able to come out on top in the softball championship because they we're clearly the better team. They were clearly one of the best when it came to hitting. You go through the hitting numbers, there's nobody even really close. As far as hits go, they're well above second place by nearly 90 hits. Um, the race for doubles was kind of close, and they did fall short in triples and home runs. So you start as far as power goes, you wouldn't say that they were the best team, but they were far from low when it comes to home runs. They were second in home runs. I think triples, they were about fifth, but they were second in home runs, and they were only second to South Carolina State, the team that they ended up beating in the in the MEAC championship game. So slug percentage, they were slug 409. On base 371. They did a really good job. They did not get struck out often. You're looking at 137 strikeouts. The next closest team is Coppin State at 160, and they played 18 less games. You hear that? Howard was so strong with their bats because you're looking at percentage-wise well above everybody. And percentage takes out the whole difference in playing. So it's like, oh, yeah, we got more hits. Well, it's because you played more games. But what about my on-base percentage? What about my slug percentage? And if talking about strikeouts, playing more games actually works to a disadvantage. And even with that being the case, playing 49 games, which is more than anybody else in the conference, they still had only 137 strikeouts. They still had less strikeouts than everybody else, despite the fact that they played more games than anybody else. And they had less strikeouts by a significant margin. I mean, Coppin State was at 160. They're the next closest, 18 less games once again. You're looking at Delaware State. They played 3 less games, but they had 187 strikeouts. So everybody else is in the 200s, despite playing less games. That's very impressive. The bats were strong for them. When it comes to South Carolina State, they lost to the Bulldogs 4-1 in about March, and it was the last game of the series. So they didn't get to play South Carolina State again. And I know this was eating up the Bison because you worked all year. You're perfect. You haven't lost a single game. You've beaten every other conference opponent, but you got this one loss on your record. And as you get closer to the end of the season, it's like I only have this one loss, and I've been great all the other times. I've won every other time. I could have a perfect record if I took care of business here. It pissed me off. Probably make you mad too. And when it came to South Carolina State versus Howard, they saw each other again for the first time since that loss, because that was the end of the series, like I said. For the first time since that game, the two matched up in the MEAC championship game. And they actually South Carolina State had to come back against Delaware State to make it to this game. But Howard was able to come out with the closer, and they won 6-1. Now, as we're talking about it, I do feel like, I don't know why I'm acting like this is hard to say. I feel like Coach Tyson was robbed when it came to Coach of the Year. The Howard softball coach should have easily been the MEAC Coach of the Year. And I understand the argument on why she wasn't. I just strongly disagree with it. I don't think that criteria should apply here. See, the reason you don't give Coach Tyson the softball Coach of the Year is because you're so impressed with the turnaround that came from Norfolk State. That is the argument, that you're looking at Coach Angie Nicholson. And look, Norfolk State was last place last year. In 2024, they were last place, 3-18 in the conference, 4-42 in total. This year they bounce back. They go second place. They're 14-7 in conference and 22-23 in totality. I get it. I really do. Nicholson comes in and gives them a strong turnaround. It's kind of similar to the Patrick Crary effect. And I know that Crary didn't end up winning the MEAC or the SWAC Coach of the Year, but at the same time, he was in a strong running, and I think they just lost that at the end. But with Crary, you saw this turnaround from FAMU that it didn't matter if he won the conference or not. They were going to give him that title. They were going to give him the Coach of the Year. And I think he would have earned it if FAMU just would have been third or fourth place. I do. But there's a difference here. Is with Crary, he led an important turnaround that led to a third or fourth place finish, or would have, right? We're talking about hypothetically. In this hypothetical, this is still different because Crary would have led a third or fourth place team. And you were thinking, well, Nicholson led a second place team. So if you're by that logic, you should be you should understand why she gets this title. Southern, the eventual champions in SWAC men's basketball, didn't run away with anything. Howard did. That's the difference. See, with Crary, you could talk about this incredible turnaround that nobody expected in your first year, and that parallel is right there with Nicholson and Norfolk State softball. But here's where it comes a little bit different. Southern, the top dog, they didn't run away with the conference, and Howard did. Howard ran away with the conference. 14-7 in second place. Howard was 20-1, and they swept you. You weren't the one. They were the best. You could best hitter versus best pitcher. No. Like all of the things you want to close. Oh, well, maybe they just preferred pitching because Norfolk State was the best pitching team versus the best hitting team in Howard because they had strong bats. I don't think that's a valid excuse. I don't, because you start talking about preferences when things are close. Like if you got two women in both 10s, oh, well, I prefer this over that. They're both beautiful. They're both immaculate, but one excels in this category that I prefer over this category. That's not the case here, guys. We're not comparing two 10s. We might be comparing a 10 and a 9, but we're not comparing two 10s. We might be comparing a 10 and an 8. I ain't going to get too deep into the whole rankings. I don't even like doing the numbers and whatnot, but they're not on the same level, in my opinion. So I wouldn't have to split hairs. Coach Tyson should have easily been the champion or the Coach of the Year. Easily. It's not like you have fatigue either. It's not, well, she wins every year, so you can't give it to her every year. No, she don't have one on her belt. You robbed her of that this year. Now you push forward. Somebody who wasn't robbed, somebody who was gifted by the man above himself, Anthony Peoples Jr. He was given gifts from the Lord, and it's called height and weight. And he's used that to make it from the NAIA level on up to UCLA in a matter of just a year. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Some people are just gifted. Some people are just given God-given abilities. And I don't even say abilities, blessings. Because being 6'9", 225 pounds is not an ability, but it is surely an asset that will get you from the NAIA level at Lewis Clark to being at UCLA in a matter of a year. And that's what happened for Anthony Peoples Jr. It's easy. That's what happened. And look, I ain't mad at it. Use what you have, right? But let's not get confused on why he's here, because you look at how much he was utilized through college, and you kind of want to wonder why he got to North Carolina Central. You kind of want to wonder that because you go back to his NAIA days at Lewis Clark. At Lewis Clark, you're looking at 28 games as a freshman, 0 starts. Averaged 14 minutes a game. Second year, 33 games, 2 starts. So you did get on the starting scorecard. Good for him. 16 minutes per game. As you're looking at Anthony Peoples Jr., at no point does he play a lot. So the fact that he keeps ascending up these ranks, going from NAIA to FC or mid-major, now going from mid-major to a high major, the fact that you are consistently rising and rising and rising, you have to wonder what it is. Why is he able to do this without playing much at any of his stops? He started 2 games in 2 years on the NAIA level. He's never averaged more than a half, as far as minutes go. He's never averaged more than a half per game. His minutes will tell you he's been a minor part of every team that he's been a part of. Minutes-wise. He led the team in blocks on the NAIA level. So maybe there's that. The fact that he didn't get a lot of run, but he did get a lot of blocks. He was second on the team as a freshman, so you do have that. But he's 6'9", 225 pounds. Like, at the end of the day, we can talk about all of these stats, but none of these stats are big. None of these stats are accumulated in crunch time. He barely played at North Carolina Central. This man is at UCLA because he is 6'9", 225 pounds. There used to be these 2 wrestlers in WWE. I'm not going to say back in the day, but it was a little while ago. It was Enzo Amore and Big Cass. I don't remember how tall Big Cass is, but Enzo used to open up every single show saying that this is Big Cass's height, and you can't teach that. And that's a fact. That is a fact, because some things you just can't teach, and height is one of them. 6'10", there we go. Every single episode of Raw or SmackDown, wherever they came into the ring, and it was Enzo and Big Cass, Enzo would be on the mic, and he would say, this is Big Cass, and he is 6'10", and you can't teach that. So allow me to have my best Enzo Amore impression. Talk about Anthony Peoples Jr. He is, 6'9"? Anthony Peoples Jr. is 6'9", and you can't teach that. But you sure can sell it to anybody who is willing to buy. And today, it is UCLA. Because at the end of the day, this is a talented player, this is a tall player who has talent as far as blocking shots. He's not a big rebounder. It's ironic because blocking shots isn't even what his best performance at North Carolina Central was. His best performance at Central was a 16-8 game against St. Andrews, in which he had 7 offensive rebounds. Without going to see that game specifically, I would imagine he probably put up a bunch of putbacks. He was 8 of 13 on the day. I don't know if he even put up 13 shots the rest of the season. He only played in 6 games. Or 8 games, I believe it was. Very low. His rebounds, 2.4 per game. His highest is a sophomore at the NAIA level, 3.5. He's not a big presence in the paint as far as rebounding. He just gets a good amount of blocks. It didn't happen in North Carolina Central, though, so I don't know if it happens at UCLA. 24/7 Sports writes this. The 6'9", 225-pound Peoples is expected to provide depth and increase the physicality of practice. As a junior last year, he averaged 5 points and 2.4 rebounds per game. The expectation is that he would also provide an emergency backup at center behind newcomers Xavier Booker and Steven Jamerson. So it's not like we're expecting him to be a huge contender at UCLA either, but it's just the interesting part of why did they come looking for him? Maybe he's a walk-on. I don't know. But why did they come looking for him? He hasn't been on the court a lot. But it's like I said, Enzo Amore would tell you, Big Cass is 6 foot 10 inches, and you can't teach that. Anthony Peoples Jr. is about an inch shorter. He's 6'9", 225, and you can't teach that. On tomorrow's episode, we'll be talking about the Southern running back transferring over to Tennessee State. This is a big deal. I think this might be the first big grab that has caught my eye out of the Tigers since moving over to the Reggie Barlow era. Let's talk about that on tomorrow's episode. Until the meantime, until the next time we hear to the family. Take care. Stay blessed. Peace.